Hello, Mr. Terhes, and thank you very much for taking the time to sit down for a short chat with me about this digital green certificate that the Commission is proposing and the MEPs are going to vote on it. Let's start first. Exactly. Let's start first by telling the people who are watching us what is a digital green certificate. From what I understand, it covers three types of medical certificates: vaccination, proof of vaccination, proof of recovery, and proof of testing. And the purpose for the certificate is to facilitate safe, free movement of the citizens of the European Union. Now, ECPM today put out a statement, and a few of our MEPs, including yourself, have concerns and are not entirely on board with this certificate. Could you talk to us why?
As you said, the European Commission is claiming that this green certificate, digital green certificate, is allegedly facilitating, quote unquote, the free movement within the European Union. If you actually, or if anybody reads the file, for a fact, the certificate is not facilitating, but is conditioning the free movement. So from a fundamental right that we all have as European citizens, the right to move freely within the European Union, the right to travel, the right to move freely, becomes pretty much from a right to a prerogative of the state that grants you that right in exchange for certain criteria that are met, like in this case, if you get vaccinated, or if you had a previous test, or if you were infected by coronavirus before. So from one of the reasons why we publicly stated that we will be opposing this certificate, it is because it's violating the right of the European citizens to free movement within the European Union. Despite the fact that it's claiming that it's facilitating the free movement, actually is conditioning the movement. So it is violating one of the fundamental rights and cornerstones that the European Union was built on.
Exactly. So like you said, the free movement is one of our fundamental rights as European citizens. It has been established in the Treaty of the European Union. But there are certain conditions there stipulated, and one of them is in case of public health. So on grounds of public health safety, the free movement may be conditioned or restricted. So how would you answer to that?
That is true. In the treaty, you have the condition, or there's a stipulation that you can condition the free movement within the European Union under the medical grounds. Now, the problem is if you look at the purpose of this certificate, what it's trying to achieve, we need to look reasonably and rationally if this certificate is actually achieving the objective that it's trying to achieve. So if you look at the issue of vaccination or proof of vaccination, for example, we've seen already that people that were vaccinated got infected by COVID. So there's a whole debate right now in the medical world about how much these vaccines are actually providing immunity to people. And if you go on the CDC website from the United States, they will explain the fact that in order to consider a medical product a vaccine, that vaccine must provide immunity. And we know for a fact now that it's not providing immunity in all the cases. So as far as the first aspect of the certificate, proof of vaccination, in order to move freely, hoping that you will not be spreading this illness anymore, clear that this is not true. As far as the second aspect, if you get a PCR test, the negative PCR test, maybe you get the test now and you get infected tomorrow, but after tomorrow you travel. So the fact that you were not infected 2 days ago, it doesn't mean that you are not infected now. As far as the fact that you might have COVID in the last 100 and so many days. You know, there's still a debate right now in the parliament for how long it will be considered that you don't have to be vaccinated, or you don't have to show proof of PCR anymore if you are vaccinated, or if you got this illness in the last 120 or 180 days. Well, we have cases where people were they got infected, 3 months after they were infected before. Others, they were infected over a year ago. They were exposed to other situations where people around them were infected and they were not infected anymore. Generally, you have people that with antibodies after they were infected for about 6 months. Well, we see now that many people have antibodies, for over a year. So there's still many unknowns here. I'm not saying that people should not get vaccinated or people should not get any other meds. The thing is, the European Commission proposed, and we as members of the parliament, members of the elected by the people, we are asked to vote on something that clearly the purpose mentioned in this certificate is not achieved. We have serious doubts that it is achieving the objective that was intended, and that is the reason why we are opposing.
I understand. And we should also mention the fact that this certificate really comes as a response to the head of states in the European Council, and them echoing the citizens' request for a uniform, harmonized response. Because what happened in 2020, people were traveling and every country had their own set of rules and their own entry requirements. So then it was a bit of a chaos when people were trying to move from one country of one member state to another. So that's why the call, and there's why the heads of state came together and said, we need a more unified response to this. And that's how the certificate came about. Now, do you think that this is the right way, or is there another option or an alternative to that? Or how would you respond to these calls for a unified approach?
Well, clearly there's a problem and there's a challenge that all the member states of the European Union were faced with. I mean, out of the blue, people got infected with this virus. People were sick. The first reaction of all the states was to close the borders and not allow people to travel anymore. That affected the economy of many countries. That affected the livelihood of many people, because they were not able even to go to work to different places So, I mean, clearly there were some challenges. Now, the question here is this certificate, in case the certificate is implemented, actually reaching the objective that we all want to reach? In other words, create immunity, making sure that people that are sick are not traveling anymore, and those that are that pass certain requirements, for example, either got vaccinated or pass a PCR test, are not infecting other people. Well, the problem is, as I stated earlier, we have situations, and the fact is that the history, I would say, of the last year is proving that people that were vaccinated are still spreading the virus. People that got a PCR test in a few days could be infected, and even people that got sick of, with this virus can get it back a few months down the road. So on one side, we all agree that we have to find a solution. The question is this the proper solution or not? Because now we go to the other side of the risks. Every time when a measure like this is implemented, especially at a level like this at the European Union, this is a regulation that will be implemented directly. The member states, the national parliaments will not have to vote on this. They will be applied directly. So obviously, many people are concerned now, because implicitly people will be forced or conditioned, in order to travel, to be vaccinated. And more and more people from the medical world are raising concerns about not only the efficiency of the vaccines, but eventually of the side effects that people might get down the road. Exactly. So as an elected official, I cannot take the chance to vote on something that I'm not 1,000% sure that it's safe. And nobody can say that at this moment, that the way these vaccines were created are 100% or not 100%, 1,000% sure. This is the reason. This is the reason why in the contracts between the European Commission and this manufacturing companies, the European Commission agreed to waive the liability from the companies to the states. So if these vaccines are, clearly they're not 100% proof. You cannot find any med that it's 100% proof. But on top of that,
and they don't claim to be. They're in the 90%.
Well, that's that.
Yeah.
So you see, so I have to vote on something like this. I can't. In good conscience, I can't. I'm sure we are all smart people in the parliament, in the commission. We all can come with other ways on how to, allow people to move freely again. But at the same time, not expose them to these risks. And good conscience, I cannot take this chance. I cannot vote on something that I'm not 1,000% sure that it's safe down the road.
Understood. You touched upon the aspect which some people call or assume that might lead to discrimination, and that is the fact that people who are vaccinated will actually get the full benefit of this digital green certificate. And the ones who have to use the testing part of it or the recovery part of it, like you said, because the validity is shorter, they will be, discriminated against. So, or not have the same ability to move like someone who has been vaccinated. So then, would you be able to address, please, the discriminatory aspect of the certificate and why? Why do you think it is?
Well, clearly it will discriminate people, especially that were not vaccinated. I mean, we've seen already around many countries in the European Union where traveling companies or hospitals or schools are asking their employees to be vaccinated, and if they are not getting vaccinated, they will lose their jobs. I mean, this is another issue by itself. Council of Europe, they came with this Oviedo Convention, which explicitly states that no person should be subjected to medical experiments or whatever, medical products against their consent. So we are in a situation here where the governments, the states, pretty much ban people from exercising certain rights, like the freedom of movement. And now the governments are coming and are saying, we will be allowing you to travel freely again in exchange to receiving, a medical product like a vaccine, maybe even against your will. So this is the concern that I personally have and my colleagues have as well. And I see many NGOs and hundreds of thousands of people across Europe. I have to tell you, we are bombarded with emails every day, thousands, tens of thousands of emails, with people who are asking us not to vote for this, because each person is realizing that this is an issue that is touching not only on the way they exercise certain rights outside of them. For example, the right of free movement or the right of free speech or things like this that are outside of them. We are talking about people's body. So when you talk about this, when the government comes and says you could not do this unless you do something else, and that something else means, getting injected with something that you might not like, or you might not want, or you have doubts, this is a problem. That is the reason why I'm saying, we all agree that we have to find a way to allow people to move freely again in Europe, but we don't think that this certificate is actually achieving that. And despite the fact that this certificate is trying to solve some of the problems that the EU is facing right now, unfortunately, is creating many more problems, and is creating some precedents that could easily be used for evil down the road.
I understand your concern. How would you respond to people who say, well, vaccination is actually not imposed, it's not mandatory, you can get tested, and or if you happened to have contracted COVID and be recovered from it, the digital green certificate covers you in that case?
Well, there are two issues here. One is the personal data. If you look at if people are checking, to see how much personal data will be collected about each one of us in the European Union, I mean, it's just mind-boggling. The system is pretty much, it's creating the foundation for a system that China implemented a few years ago, where it's tracking everybody, how they move, what they do. And the concerns that privacy advocates have is, easily a system like this, a database like this, that it's storing the details of every person in the European Union, or the majority of the people in the European Union, let's say, could easily be used for a purpose like this, like the one in China. On top of that, you have again the issue of discrimination, because on one side, someone who's vaccinated, can do certain things. Someone who's not can. On top of that, there's the third issue, the cost of these tests. Who is paying for them? Why someone who maybe even against his or her will get vaccinated can move freely somewhere? And if I have doubts and I'm still pushing back and I don't want to allow the government, to vaccinate me, I can't go freely somewhere unless I pay for a test in order to go. It will be, this test is costing a lot. In Romania, for example, there are about 240 leis, which is 60, 70 euros or so. Yeah. I mean, if you have to do a test like this every day, you will get bankrupt. There is, these are issues that have to be taken into consideration.
Absolutely. Free testing, I still don't understand why we could not do free testing across Europe or all over the EU. For all its faults, US is pretty good at providing free testing. But anyway, we're not there. We're not providing free testing across EU. So that
is a problem. And I mean, imagine for people, especially in Eastern Europe, where the salary is, exactly, I don't know, 700 euros a month or so.
It's not affordable. It's not affordable at all.
Exactly. So this is clearly creating discrimination. And then at the end of the day, the poorest people will be the most affected, which is not fair. We live in a union where everybody has to be treated equally. And again, besides all these arguments, the main one, and the concern that I personally have is I cannot vote for something that will even indirectly give the power to the government to impose vaccination on people. And we don't have we still have issues with this, there are still debates and arguments. And I don't think it would be fair for any of us. I don't want anybody, for example, to vote what would happen with my body. It's the same thing. We need to find ways that are not intrusive and that are not giving power to governments how to decide, on what to do with your body, pretty much.
Understood. You also touched a little bit on the data issue, on the privacy or the vulnerability, actually, of our data. Let's talk a little bit about that, because that was the third argument of the statement, and you are a part of the LIBE committee in the parliament. And from what I read, the transcripts of the speeches made by the members there, most of the people in the LIBE committee, most of the members are concerned about the vulnerability of our, especially the medical data is sensitive data. So it's not very clear how it will be handled or stored, or when people travel, what happens at the point of entry to our data, so on and so forth. So would you speak about that briefly?
This is another issue that is concerning a lot of people. And you mentioned the debate in the LIBE committee. I mean, if there's a recording online with the whole debate from the beginning to end, and you will not find one MEP, not two, one, that will say that there's no issue with this certificate. Every MEP from any political group, from the left to the right spectrum of the parliament, each one had something to complain about the certificate, either about privacy, about security, about conditioning the free movement, about forced vaccination, whatever argument you want. it was mentioned and it was raised during this debate. So if you cannot find, even in the Libe committee, which is one of the most liberal, so I would say, committees in the parliament, you could not find one man that will say, I fully agree with everything that was said there. Why in the world would we even vote on something like this and impose something like this on the citizens of the European Union? It is simply unfair. On top of that, as far as the data, we don't know yet, not only how this data will be collected, but how this data will be stored. Who will store the data? Who will validate the data? Who will protect the data? I mean, imagine to have such of data, you know, from hundreds of millions of people. How much resources that, and it's pretty much a gold mine for any hacker or company or any other country that wants to you know, do certain bad or negative influence in the European Union. I mean, we've seen even huge tech companies like Google, Yahoo, or Amazon, they got their servers hacked. What guarantees do we have that the countries in the European Union will be able to protect this personal data, not only of the people from their own countries, but from the other countries as well? Because if you travel from Romania to Slovakia, for example, they will have to store your data as well, because somehow they have to be able to validate, to match whatever you have on your certificate against another database, you know, to make sure that you haven't forged that certificate. So these are issues that were raised by many people in the Libe committee, and even I don't have a clear answer to that.
Exactly. I'm going to push back a little bit, or play the devil's advocate, and mention what I heard the commissioners, or what I read the commissioners responding to that. And that is that the information or the data collected is very limited. So from what I read, it includes our full name, our date of birth, and the type of vaccine that we got, and the member state that issued it. The QR code that is included in the certificate indeed has a signature of some sort that is the only thing that is exchanged between countries, but that doesn't include our data necessarily. So it's not stored anywhere, is what they're claiming. Does that explanation satisfy you, or are you?
Not at all.
Okay.
I worked before I was elected in the European Parliament. I worked in the IT industry as a director of business intelligence for a non-invasive medical company in the United States. So I've been doing programming and putting together databases and things like that. It's not what they say. It's just I don't trust it, because every time you need two fields in order to validate any information. It's exactly when you log in on your computer or in an email. You need a username and a password. Just one key is not enough in order to validate that request is legitimate. So they have to have this QR code and some other information in order to make sure that the QR code plus the other information is matching a unique record in a database. So clearly they will be storing more data than they are claiming. But I go even beyond that. Why do they have to do this? Why do they have to store these? Why do we have to be subjected to this type of pretty much mass surveillance and allow something like this to happen? You know, I would say, you know, leave the debate open. Let everybody in the EU, you know, we have very good NGOs that have been dealing with this stuff, you know, companies, let them come up with maybe better solutions. And I'm sure we can. The problem was even the whole process was voted in the parliament, you know, to be in an accelerated procedure. We could not even debate the issue long enough. People barely had a chance to read the documents. So for a measure like this, that it's so intrusive, to do everything, you know, fast forward, not to allow people to debate, to read, to think, to contemplate, and any other things, you know, this is concerning in itself.
Right. How would you respond to people who say, well, this is no more risky or not riskier than using the passport, for instance. We all use a passport or an ID to move from one country to the other. Those documents contain our personal data, our biometric data, at least my passport does, for instance. Every time we go through a point of entry, we have those documents scanned or checked by someone. And the argument could be made that, well, that data is no more sensitive than what would be in this green pass. So why do we use so freely one, but disagree with using the other?
Well, the passport has these things, built in it. You go with this passport around and it has these safety measures and security measures built in the passport. And if you try to pass, to go to any checkpoint, they have certain devices that are checking the authenticity of the document. They are not storing, or they are not matching, I would say, that passport against the database that they have. For example, they might collect that data every time when travelers are passing that checkpoint, but they don't have a preset of data with all the people from the European Union, for example, that are traveling. So in this case, the situation is different. There will be, your medical doctor, for example, your family doctor or whatever, whatever clinic will get you a vaccine. They will enter your information into a database and they will give you this certificate. And then you go to another country and that other country will check if you got that vaccine in your country and if that certificate is legit or not, which is way more intrusive than having a passport. On top of that, beyond this data and stuff, because data at the end of the day, you can delete the data. The main issue is that you have a governmental body that one way or another is conditioning you to exercise a right for renouncing to another right. In other words, they are conditioning you to exercise the right of free movement in exchange to allow them to do whatever they want to do with your body, which is not okay at all.
It isn't, you are right. Well, thank you very much for your input and for the explanations. I think this will be very helpful to our audiences and to the people who follow us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.